For years, he had navigated the cold, star-studded void between distant planets and uncharted galaxies, exploring the unknown corners of the universe with a blend of fearlessness and curiosity. The universe, with all its mysteries, had become his home, a boundless expanse of potential discoveries. But as Leo stared at the malfunctioning control panel of his ship, the stellar Voyager, he realized with a sinking heart that his journey might soon be coming to an abrupt and catastrophic end. The stellar Voyager was a sleek and nimble craft designed for deep space exploration, equipped with the latest in human technology. Leo had always taken pride in her performance, meticulously maintaining every system to ensure she could handle the most demanding missions. But no amount of preparation could have anticipated the sudden and catastrophic failure that had just occurred. One moment, Leo had been charting a new course toward the Andromeda sector, and the next, a series of warning lights had exploded across the console, accompanied by the shrill sound of alarms. Critical systems failure, the ship's AI intoned in its calm, feminine voice, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting around Leo. Power core destabilizing. Immediate action required. Leo's hands flew over the controls, his mind racing. He rerouted power, initiated emergency protocols, and attempted to stabilize the core, but nothing worked. The ship shuddered violently, and he knew it was only a matter of time before the core would reach critical levels. AI, initiate emergency landing procedures. What's the nearest planetary body? Leo shouted, his voice tight with urgency. Calculating, the AI responded, a slight pause before continuing. Nearest planetary body, Santara. Atmospheric conditions are within acceptable parameters for emergency landing. Landing coordinates transmitted. Leo cursed under his breath. Santara was a name he barely recognized from old star maps, a planet on the fringes of explored space, known only for its dense, impenetrable forests and its hostile, unexplored terrain. It was far from ideal, but with the power core about to blow, it was his only option. Hold on, girl, Leo murmured to the ship, as if his words could somehow soothe the dying vessel. He engaged the emergency thrusters and angled the ship toward the planet, watching as the stars outside his viewport began to blur with the intense speed of their descent. The stellar Voyager screamed through the atmosphere of Xantara, a blazing comet trailing smoke and fire. The ship's hull groaned under the stress, and Leo gritted his teeth, gripping the controls with white-knuckled determination. The ground rushed up to meet him, an expanse of thick, emerald-green forest punctuated by jagged mountain peaks and deep, shadowed valleys. The landscape was breathtaking, but Leo had no time to admire it. He was focused solely on survival. The impact, when it came, was brutal. The ship tore through the treetops, snapping ancient trunks like matchsticks, before crashing into the ground with bone-jarring force. Leo was thrown forward, his harness biting into his shoulders, the world spinning in a blur of green and brown. The stellar Voyager skidded across the forest floor, carving a deep trench in the earth before finally coming to a shuddering halt. For a long moment, there was only silence. Leo hung in his harness, dazed and disoriented, the acrid smell of burning electronics filling the cockpit. His ears rang, and his vision swam, but he forced himself to focus, to assess his situation. AI. Status report, he croaked, his voice rough from the smoke. Multiple systems offline. Power core stabilized but heavily damaged. Life support functioning at minimal levels. Hull integrity compromised. Recommend immediate evacuation. Leo grimaced, his body protesting as he unbuckled himself and staggered to his feet. The ship's interior was a mess of sparking wires, shattered screens, and upended equipment. He grabbed a survival pack and slung it over his shoulder, knowing he couldn't stay inside the damaged vessel for long. The atmosphere on Xantara was breathable, according to the AI, but the ship could become a death trap if the power core failed again. Stumbling through the twisted remains of the ship's interior, Leo made his way to the emergency exit hatch. With a grunt of effort, he wrenched it open and climbed out, blinking against the sudden brightness of Xantara's sunlight. The scene that greeted him was both alien and beautiful. Xantara's forest stretched out in every direction, an endless sea of towering trees with thick, intertwined canopies that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of vegetation, rich and earthy, and alive with the sounds of unseen creatures. The trees themselves were unlike any Leo had ever seen, massive, with gnarled roots that twisted like serpents through the underbrush, their leaves a deep, shimmering green that seemed almost iridescent in the light. But there was something else in the air too: attention, a sense of being watched. Leo's instincts, honed from years of exploration on hostile worlds, told him that this was a place of both great beauty and great danger. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The crash had left him bruised and battered, but he was alive. That was what mattered. Now, he needed to assess the damage to his ship and figure out how to survive on this alien world until he could find a way off it. Leo made his way around the wreckage, wincing at the sight of the Stellar Voyager's battered hull. The ship had been his lifeline, and seeing it in such a state was like looking at a wounded friend. He knelt down to examine the power core, housed in a compartment at the rear of the ship. The casing was scorched and there were visible cracks running through the material, a bad sign. He'd need to make extensive repairs if he had any hope of getting it running again. But repairs required tools and, more importantly, parts that the Stellar Voyager might not be able to provide. Leo ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, frustration bubbling up inside him. He was a pilot, not a mechanic. And while he knew his ship inside and out, the prospect of fixing such extensive damage was daunting. As he stood, his mind racing with plans and possibilities, something in the underbrush caught his attention, a flash of movement, a rustle of leaves. Leo froze, his senses sharpening. He wasn't alone. Slowly, carefully, he turned toward the source of the sound, his hand inching toward the sidearm holstered at his hip. The forest was dense, the shadows deep, and whatever was out there was hidden within them. For a moment, he thought it might be some kind of animal, curious about the crash. But then he saw a pair of eyes, large and luminous, peering at him from the darkness of the trees. Leo's heart skipped a beat. The eyes were not those of a predator. They were intelligent, calculating, and filled with a mix of curiosity and fear. As the creature emerged from the shadows, Leo's breath caught in his throat. It was a fox, but unlike any fox Leo had ever seen. Its fur was a soft, silvery white, shot through with streaks of celestial blue that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Its tail was long and bushy, tipped with a star-like glow, and its eyes, those mesmerizing, otherworldly eyes, were deep, endless black like the void of space itself. The celestial fox was as beautiful as it was alien, a creature of myth and wonder. Leo had heard of such beings in stories told by travelers, but he had never believed they truly existed. Now, standing before him was proof of their existence, and it was clear that this creature was no ordinary animal. The fox watched him for a moment longer, then took a hesitant step forward, its movements graceful and fluid. It was smaller than he expected, perhaps no larger than a medium-sized dog, but there was an undeniable presence about it, a sense of power and otherness that made Leo feel as though he were in the presence of something ancient and wise. But as the fox moved closer, Leo noticed something that sent a spike of anger through him. Around the fox's neck was a crude metal collar, chafing against its delicate fur. The collar was attached to a length of chain, broken and trailing behind the creature, dragging through the underbrush. The fox had been bound, imprisoned, and from the looks of it, mistreated. Leo's protective instincts flared to life. He had always had a soft spot for animals, and the sight of this majestic creature in such a state filled him with a fierce determination. He crouched down, extending a hand toward the fox, his movements slow and non-threatening. "Hey there, little one," he murmured, his voice soothing. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The fox hesitated, its ears twitching, before it took another tentative step forward. Leo remained still, letting the creature approach him at its own pace. It sniffed the air, its eyes never leaving his, and after a long, tense moment, it seemed to make a decision. The fox closed the distance between them, nuzzling its head against Leo's outstretched hand. A wave of relief washed over him as he gently stroked the fox's fur, marveling at its softness. The creature's trust in him was a fragile thing, and he knew he had to be careful not to break it. He examined the collar, noting the rough edges where it had been hastily cut. Whoever had imprisoned this fox had done so with little care for its well-being. Leo's anger simmered beneath the surface, but he forced himself to focus. He needed to get the collar off the fox, but without the right tools it would be difficult. He glanced back at the wreckage of the Stellar Voyager, considering his options. The ship might have something he could use to remove the collar, but he'd need to be quick. There was no telling when the fox's captors might return. As if on cue, a distant sound reached his ears, the unmistakable hum of engines. Leo's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. The fox, too, seemed to sense the danger, its body tensing as it looked toward the sky. "They're coming back," Leo muttered, his mind racing. He couldn't stay here, not with the fox in such a vulnerable state. He needed to find shelter, somewhere they could hide until the immediate threat passed. Without wasting another moment, Leo scooped the fox into his arms, ignoring its startled yip. He turned and dashed into the forest, away from the clearing and the wreckage of his ship. The forest closed in around him, the trees towering overhead like ancient sentinels, their thick branches forming a natural canopy that blocked out much of the light. Leo's breath came in quick, shallow bursts as he ran, the weight of the fox in his arms barely registering. His mind was focused on one thing: finding a safe place to hide. The sound of engines grew louder, closer, and he knew that whoever was looking for the fox wouldn't be far behind. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Leo spotted a narrow crevice in a rocky outcrop, partially hidden by thick vines and underbrush. It was just large enough for him to squeeze through, and it looked like it would provide decent cover. He slipped inside, keeping a firm hold on the fox, and crouched low, trying to calm his racing heart. The engines roared overhead, and Leo pressed himself deeper into the shadows, hoping they wouldn't be spotted. The fox remained still in his arms, its body trembling slightly, but it didn't make a sound. Together, they waited, the tension between them palpable. Minutes passed like hours, the sounds of the search party echoing through the forest. Leo listened intently, his senses on high alert, until finally the noise began to fade. The engines grew distant, and the forest slowly returned to its previous state of quiet. Leo let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The immediate danger had passed, but he knew they weren't out of the woods yet, literally or figuratively. He would need to keep moving, stay hidden, and figure out who was after the fox and why. But as he looked down at the creature in his arms, now curled up against his chest, he felt a surge of resolve. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to abandon this fox to its fate. They were in this together now, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. Leo gently set the fox down, giving it a reassuring pat. "We'll be okay," he said, more to himself than to the fox. "We just need to keep our heads down and figure out our next move." The fox looked up at him, its dark eyes filled with an emotion Leo couldn't quite place: gratitude, perhaps, or maybe trust. It was a fleeting moment of connection, but it was enough to strengthen his resolve. They were alone on an alien world, pursued by unknown enemies, but they had each other. And for Leo, that was enough to keep going. As he sat back, gathering his thoughts and planning his next steps, he couldn't help but wonder about the significance of the creature he had rescued. What made this celestial fox so important that someone would go to such lengths to capture it? And what was he going to do when those who sought it returned in force? Leo didn't have the answers yet, but he knew one thing for certain: his unexpected journey on Centaura had only just begun. Centaura was a world of secrets, a planet where the line between myth and reality blurred into a haze of wonder and fear. Few understood this better than Zira, the brilliant and enigmatic scientist who had dedicated her life to uncovering Xantara's mysteries. But on this day, even the secrets of the planet paled in comparison to the gnawing fear that consumed her. Her beloved companion, the celestial fox, was missing. The research facility that Zira called home was nestled deep within the heart of Xantara's most ancient forest, a place where the trees whispered stories of eons past, and the ground was thick with the roots of history itself. Zira had always felt a profound connection to this world, a bond that went beyond the scientific. Centaura was her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in her work and in the companionship of the one creature who seemed to understand her completely. The celestial fox had been with Zira for years, ever since she had rescued the rare and sacred creature from the clutches of a poacher who sought to sell it on the black market. From the moment they met, there had been an unspoken bond between them, a connection that transcended words. The fox had become more than just a companion. It was a symbol of everything Zira held dear: her love for Xantara, her dedication to protecting its secrets, and her deep, personal quest for knowledge. But now, that bond had been broken, torn apart by an act of violence and greed. The fox was gone, stolen in the dead of night, leaving behind only a broken cage and a trail of destruction that led into the depths of the forest. Zira's heart ached with a mixture of rage and sorrow as she stood in the ruins of her laboratory, her mind racing with questions and fears. Who would dare, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling with a rare display of emotion, who would be foolish enough to take what is mine? Her hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, willing herself to calm down. Anger would not help her now. She needed to think, to plan. She needed to find her fox before it was too late. Zira's mind raced through the possibilities, considering every angle. The celestial fox was not just a cherished pet, it was a being of immense power, its very essence tied to the mystical forces that pulsed through Xantara. In the wrong hands, that power could be exploited, twisted for dark purposes. She couldn't let that happen. With a deep breath, Zira opened her eyes and turned to her console, her fingers flying over the keys as she brought up the security footage from the night of the kidnapping. The screens flickered to life, showing the quiet, moonlit interior of her facility. For several minutes, nothing moved, nothing disturbed the stillness until, suddenly, shadows danced across the edges of the screen, figures moving with stealth and precision. Zira leaned in, her sharp eyes narrowing as she watched the intruders breach the outer defenses with ease. They were professionals, skilled and efficient, their faces obscured by masks. They moved through the facility like ghosts, leaving no trace but the damage they caused. Her heart pounded as the footage showed them reaching the fox's enclosure. The creatures on the screen were cold and methodical, showing no emotion as they disabled the security systems and broke open the cage. The fox, terrified and cornered, had fought back, but it was no match for the sheer number of its captors. They had subdued it quickly, roughly, and dragged it away, disappearing into the night without a trace. Zira's jaw clenched as she watched the footage, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. She rewound the footage, scrutinizing every detail, looking for any clue that might reveal who these kidnappers were and where they had taken her fox. But they had covered their tracks well, leaving behind no obvious leads. With a frustrated sigh, Zira pushed away from the console and paced the room, her mind spinning with possibilities. She knew that she couldn't do this alone. Finding the fox would require help, and not just any help. She needed the best. It didn't take long for her to make her decision. Zira strode to the communication panel and activated it, sending out a call to a group she had worked with before, a team of elite trackers and warriors known throughout the galaxy for their skills in hunting down elusive prey. They were not people she liked or trusted, but they were effective, and right now that was all that mattered. The leader of the group, a grizzled veteran named Kale, appeared on the screen. His scarred face and piercing eyes conveyed the experience of 1,000 battles, and his expression was one of mild curiosity mixed with a hint of respect. Zira, Kale said, his voice a low rumble. "It's been a while. What can I do for you?" "I have a job for you," Zira replied, her tone clipped and businesslike. "My celestial fox has been kidnapped. I need it back unharmed. Your team will be well compensated." Kale raised an eyebrow, the hint of a smirk playing on his lips. "A celestial fox, huh? That's a rare creature. I can see why you'd be upset. But you know these things aren't easy to track, especially if it's already off-planet." "It hasn't left," Centaura, Zira said firmly. "The kidnappers were last seen heading into the northern forests. I've already sent you the coordinates. I want you to find them, retrieve the fox, and bring it back to me. No questions, no complications." Kale studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You seem pretty worked up about this. Is there something more you're not telling me?" Zira's eyes flashed with irritation. "I told you everything you need to know, Kale. The fox is important to me, and I expect you to treat this job with the utmost seriousness." "Understood." Kale held up his hands in a placating gesture. All right. No need to get all riled up. We'll find your fox and bring it back, just like you asked. But it won't be cheap." Zira's lips pressed into a thin line. "You'll be paid, Kale. Just do your job." With a curt nod, Kale ended the transmission, and Zira let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She hated dealing with people like Kale, mercenaries who cared only for credits and glory, but she had no choice. The celestial fox was too important, and she would do whatever it took to get it back. As the day wore on, Zira's impatience grew. She couldn't sit idly by while others searched for her fox. She needed to be doing something, anything, to aid in the hunt. She gathered her gear, checked her weapons, and prepared to set out into the forest herself. She might not be a tracker, but she knew Sentara better than anyone, and she wouldn't rest until she had exhausted every possible lead. With her mind made up, Zira left the safety of her facility and plunged into the depths of the forest. The air was thick with the scent of earth and foliage, and the trees loomed overhead like ancient guardians, their branches forming a dense canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft emerald glow. The forest was alive with the sounds of chirping insects, rustling leaves, and distant animal calls, a symphony that had become as familiar to Zira as her own heartbeat. But today, the forest felt different. There was an undercurrent of tension, a sense that something was not quite right. Zira's instincts, honed from years of living on Sentara, told her to be cautious, to stay alert. She moved silently through the underbrush, her senses on high alert, her mind focused on the task at hand. Hours passed as she searched, following the faintest signs of the kidnapper's passage, a broken branch here, a disturbed patch of earth there. The trail was cold, but Zira refused to give up. She pressed on, driven by a mixture of determination and fear, her thoughts consumed by the fox's fate. As she trekked deeper into the forest, Zira's mind wandered back to the day she had first encountered the celestial fox. It had been a chance meeting, a stroke of fate that had brought the two of them together. The fox had been injured, caught in a hunter's trap, and Zira had saved it, nursing it back to health and forming a bond that went beyond mere companionship. The fox had become her partner in her research, its unique abilities providing insights into Sentara's hidden mysteries that she never could have uncovered alone. The thought of losing the fox was unbearable. It wasn't just a scientific asset, it was a part of her life, a constant presence that had brought her comfort and joy in the often lonely world of research. Zira knew that she couldn't rest until the fox was safe in her care once more. Suddenly, Zira's thoughts were interrupted by a rustling in the bushes ahead. She froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at her side. The forest had grown eerily quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife conspicuously absent. She strained her ears, listening for any sign of movement, her body tensed and ready. Then she saw a figure moving through the trees, moving with a cautious but determined pace. Zira narrowed her eyes, trying to get a better look. It wasn't one of Kale's men. This figure was different, clad in strange, unfamiliar clothing, and moving with a sense of purpose that suggested they were more than just a lost traveler. The human froze, his head snapping up to look at her, his eyes wide with surprise. He was young, with a rugged appearance that suggested he had been through some rough times, but it was the look in his eyes that caught Zira's attention, a mixture of fear, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite place. "Who are you?" Zira demanded, keeping her weapon trained on him. "And what are you doing with my fox?" The human blinked, clearly taken aback by her sudden appearance. "Your fox," I began, but Zira cut him off. "Don't play games with me," she snapped, her patience wearing thin. "I've been searching for that fox for days. I know it was stolen from me, and now I find you with it. So, I'll ask you again, who are you, and what are you doing with my fox?" The human swallowed, his expression shifting from surprise to something closer to desperation. "My name is Leo," he said, his voice tense but steady. "I'm a pilot. I crashed here by accident. I found your fox being mistreated by some thugs. I rescued it, I swear." Zira's eyes narrowed, her mind racing as she processed his words. A pilot. A crash. It sounded like a convenient excuse, but there was something about his tone, the sincerity in his voice, that gave her pause. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes flicking between his face and the fox in his arms. The creature seemed calm, its trembling had stopped, and it was looking up at her with those deep, trusting eyes. It wasn't the reaction she had expected from a fox that had been mistreated and stolen. "Why should I believe you?" Zira asked, her voice still cold but with a hint of doubt creeping in. Leo hesitated, then carefully set the fox down at his feet, keeping his hands where she could see them. "Because I have no reason to lie," he said, his gaze steady. "I don't know what's going on here. I just wanted to help. If you're the fox's owner, then you should know I mean it no harm. I just wanted to protect it." Zira's grip on her weapon tightened, but the anger she had felt earlier was beginning to wane, replaced by a sense of uncertainty. The pieces weren't adding up. If Leo was telling the truth, then who were the men who had stolen the fox in the first place, and why had they targeted her research facility? She took a slow, measured breath, lowering her weapon slightly. "If you're telling the truth, then you're caught up in something much bigger than you realize, Leo. This fox is no ordinary creature. It's a being of immense power, tied to the very essence of Zantara. There are those who would do anything to possess that power, and if they believe you have it, they won't stop until they get it." Leo's eyes widened, and he glanced down at the fox, a new understanding dawning in his expression. "I had no idea," he murmured. "I just wanted to keep it safe. But if what you're saying is true, then we're both in danger." Zira nodded, her mind already shifting to the next steps. She couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment, not when there was so much at stake. She needed to think clearly to make sure the fox was safe, and to figure out who was behind the kidnapping. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice firm. "The men who took the fox will be back, and they'll be looking for us. We'll go to my facility, it's well protected, and we can figure out what to do next from there." Leo hesitated, clearly weighing his options, but he nodded in agreement, his expression determined. "Lead the way." Zira didn't waste any time. She turned and began to make her way through the forest, her senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Leo followed close behind, the celestial fox trotting at his side, its luminous eyes darting around as if it too sensed the gravity of the situation. As they moved through the dense underbrush, Zira couldn't help but feel a flicker of doubt. She had always prided herself on her ability to remain detached, to keep her emotions in check, but the events of the past few days had shaken her in ways she hadn't expected. She was supposed to be the one in control, the one who knew all the answers. But now, with Leo by her side and the fox's fate hanging in the balance, she realized just how little she truly understood. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. Zira's facility loomed in the distance, a stark contrast to the wild beauty of the forest around it. It was a place of safety, of knowledge, but now it also felt like a place of uncertainty. As they approached the entrance, Zira keyed in the access code, the heavy doors sliding open with a quiet hiss. She led Leo and the fox inside, the sterile, artificial light of the facility a stark contrast to the natural world outside. The doors closed behind them with a soft thud, sealing them in. Zira took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had brought them here for safety, but now that they were inside, the weight of the situation pressed down on her. The facility had always been her sanctuary, her place of solitude and research, but now it felt like a cage, trapping her with the unresolved tension between herself, Leo, and the mystery of the fox's kidnapping. She turned to face Leo, her expression unreadable. "We'll be safe here for now, but we need to figure out our next move. If what you told me is true, then you're not just an innocent bystander or target. And so am I." Leo nodded, his face serious. "I understand. I didn't ask for this, but I'm in it now. Whatever we need to do, I'm with you." Zira studied him for a moment longer, then gave a curt nod. "Good. We'll start by reviewing the data I've collected. Maybe we can find something that will tell us who's behind this." As she moved to the console, the celestial fox padded over to her, its eyes following her every movement. Zira felt a pang of guilt. She had let her anger cloud her judgment, nearly turning on the very person who had saved her beloved companion. But there was no time for regrets now. They were in this together, and they needed to be ready for whatever came next. As Zira began to sift through the data, her mind racing with possibilities, Leo stood nearby, his gaze fixed on the screen. They were two strangers, brought together by circumstance and bound by a shared purpose. The tension between them was palpable, but so too was a growing sense of camaraderie. The night wore on as they worked side by side, the quiet hum of the facility the only sound. The celestial fox curled up at Zira's feet, its presence a comforting reminder of why they were fighting. And as the hours passed, a new understanding began to form between Zira and Leo, a fragile alliance born of necessity, but one that held the potential for something more. But even as they made progress, Zira couldn't shake the feeling that they were on borrowed time. The forces that had taken the fox would not stop until they had what they wanted, and she knew that the battle was far from over. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the facility's windows, Zira looked over at Leo, her expression hardening with resolve. "We'll find out who's behind this," she said, her voice firm. "And when we do, we'll make sure they never threaten us again." Leo met her gaze, his own determination mirroring hers. "Agreed, whatever it takes." And so, as the sun rose over Xantara, Zira and Leo prepared themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. They were two unlikely allies, thrust into a dangerous game with high stakes. But they had the celestial fox, they had each other, and, for now, that was enough. But in the back of Zira's mind, a lingering question remained, one that she knew she couldn't ignore for long. What would happen when all of this was over? What would happen when the fox was safe, the enemies defeated, and the danger past? As much as she tried to push the thought away, it remained, a silent whisper in the depths of her mind, because for the first time in a long time, Zira found herself caring about someone other than herself and the fox. And that, she knew, could change everything. Zira's heart skipped a beat as the figure came into view, a human. Of all things, alone in the depths of Xantara's most dangerous forest. What was a human doing here, so far from any known settlement? And why were they moving as if they had a specific destination in mind? Her mind raced with possibilities. Could this human be connected to the kidnapping? It seemed unlikely. Kale's report had mentioned nothing about humans being involved. But Zira wasn't about to take any chances. She needed answers. And this human might have them. With silent precision, Zira moved closer, keeping to the shadows as she approached the unsuspecting figure. As she got nearer, she saw something that made her blood run cold, the celestial fox, nestled in the human's arms, looking frightened and disoriented. For a moment, Zira's heart wrenched at the sight of her beloved companion in the arms of a stranger. But the initial shock quickly gave way to a surge of anger. This human had her fox. How they had come to possess it didn't matter. What mattered was that they had it, and Zira would stop at nothing to get it back. She stepped out from the shadows, her weapon raised and her voice cold and commanding. "Stop right there." Xantara's nights were long and filled with secrets. The forest that surrounded Zira's research facility was cloaked in shadows, the trees whispering to one another in a language only they understood. The sky above was a tapestry of stars, twinkling like distant beacons in the vast expanse of space, and the two moons of Xantara cast a pale, eerie light over the landscape. It was a world that seemed to exist on the edge of dreams, where reality blurred with the fantastical and anything seemed possible. Inside the facility, the atmosphere was tense but calm. Zira and Leo had spent the better part of the night poring over the data Zira had collected, searching for any clues that might lead them to the culprits behind the celestial fox's kidnapping. The hours had passed in a blur of focused work, the urgency of their situation driving them forward. But now, As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, exhaustion was beginning to set in. Zira leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as she tried to make sense of the information in front of her. Despite their efforts, the data had revealed little that they didn't already know. The kidnappers were professionals, their tracks well covered, and any leads they had uncovered were frustratingly vague. It was clear that whoever was behind this knew how to operate in the shadows. Leo sat across from her, his expression thoughtful as he reviewed the security footage for what must have been the 100th time. The celestial fox lay curled up at his feet, its chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm as it slept. The creature had been through a lot in the past few days, but it seemed to have found some measure of peace in their presence. As Zira watched the fox, a sense of guilt gnawed at her. She had been so consumed by her anger and fear that she had nearly made a terrible mistake. Leo had saved the fox, and instead of thanking him, she had accused him, treated him as if he were the enemy. The memory of their confrontation in the forest still stung, a reminder of how easily her emotions could get the better of her. Zira was not used to feeling vulnerable. She was a woman of science, of logic and reason, and she had always prided herself on her ability to remain calm and detached in the face of danger. But the events of the past few days had shaken her in ways she hadn't expected. For the first time in years, she found herself doubting her own judgment, questioning her ability to protect what she cared about. Leo, on the other hand, seemed to have taken everything in stride. Despite the danger, despite being stranded on an alien world with no way to return home, he had remained calm, focused, and determined to do what was right. It was a quality Zira couldn't help but admire, even as it made her question her own approach to the situation. Anything, Zira asked, breaking the silence that had settled over the room. Leo shook his head, his eyes still fixed on the screen. Nothing we haven't already seen. These guys knew what they were doing. They planned this out, covered their tracks well. Zira sighed, frustrated. I was afraid of that. We're dealing with professionals, possibly hired mercenaries. They're not going to be easy to track down. Leo leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. We need to think outside the box. Whoever they are, they're after the fox for a reason. Maybe if we figure out what they want, we can get ahead of them. Zira nodded, considering his words. The celestial fox is a creature of immense power. Its abilities are tied to Xantara itself, to the very life force of this planet. In the wrong hands, that power could be used for, well, anything. That's what worries me. Leo glanced down at the sleeping fox, his expression softening. It's hard to believe something so small could be so powerful. But I've seen enough out there to know that appearances can be deceiving. Zira allowed herself a small smile. Indeed, the fox may seem fragile, but it's connected to forces we barely understand. I've spent years studying it, trying to unlock its secrets, but even I've only scratched the surface. Leo's gaze shifted back to Zira, curiosity flickering in his eyes. What have you discovered? And Zira hesitated for a moment, then decided there was no harm in sharing what she knew. After all, Leo had earned her trust, at least for now. The celestial fox. She began, her voice taking on a more thoughtful tone, is what we call a conduit. It's a living link between the physical world and the spiritual or mystical forces that permeate Xantara. The fox can sense things that we can't inches in the environment, shifts in the planet's energy. It can even manipulate these forces to some extent, though I've never been able to fully understand how. Leo listened intently, his interest clearly piqued. So, it's like a living sensor, or maybe more like a guardian. Zira nodded. In a way, yes. The people of Xantara, those who lived here long before I arrived, revered the celestial fox as a sacred being, a protector of the natural world. They believed it had the power to heal the land, to maintain the balance between the different forces at play on this planet. That's incredible, Leo said, his admiration evident. But if it's so important, why would anyone want to kidnap it? What could they possibly gain? Zira frowned, her thoughts darkening. Power, control. If someone could harness the fox's abilities, they could manipulate Xantara's environment, perhaps even its very essence. Imagine being able to control the weather, the growth of crops, or even the flow of time itself. The possibilities are endless and dangerous. Leo's expression hardened. And if they fail? Zira met his gaze, her voice grim. If they fail, the consequences could be catastrophic. The fox is not a tool to be used lightly. If its connection to the planet is disrupted, it could cause irreversible damage to Xantara. The balance could be shattered, and the results would be devastating. A heavy silence settled over them as the weight of Zira's words sank in. The stakes were higher than Leo had realized, and he could see the strain in Zira's eyes, the burden she carried as the protector of this extraordinary creature. Leo began, his voice gentle. I know this is more than just a mission for you. This fox, it means a lot to you, doesn't it? Zero looked down at the fox, her expression softening. It does. The celestial fox is more than just a subject of my research. It's been my companion, my partner for years. I've dedicated my life to understanding it, to protecting it. And now, to have it stolen, to see it in danger, it's more than I can bear. Leo reached across the table, placing a hand on Zira's arm in a gesture of comfort. We'll get it back. We'll figure out who's behind this and we'll stop them. You're not alone in this. Zira looked up at him, her eyes searching his for a moment before she nodded. Thank you, Leo. I've been alone for a long time. It's good to have someone I can trust. Leo offered her a reassuring smile. We're in this together now. Whatever it takes, we'll make sure the fox is safe. For a moment, they simply sat in silence, the bond between them growing stronger with each passing second. It was a bond forged in the crucible of adversity, born of necessity but tempered by mutual respect and understanding. In Leo, Zira had found not just an ally, but a kindred spirit, someone who shared her determination to protect the fox and the world it represented. As the morning light continued to filter into the room, Zira felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her in the hours after the kidnapping were still there, but they were now tempered by hope, a hope that together, she and Leo could find a way to overcome the challenges ahead. We should get some rest, Zira said, breaking the silence. We'll need our strength for whatever comes next. Leo nodded, stifling a yawn. Agreed. It's been a long night. They both rose from the table, and Zira led the way to the facility's living quarters, a series of small, functional rooms that offered little in the way of luxury but provided all the essentials for a comfortable stay. She showed Leo to a room, then retired to her own, the celestial fox padding along behind her. As Zira settled into her bed, the fox curled up beside her, its presence a comforting reminder that she wasn't alone. She reached out, gently stroking its soft fur, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of the days ahead, she knew she had to stay strong for the fox, for Xantara, and now, for Leo. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and dreamless, a welcome respite from the turmoil of the past few days. The following morning, Zira awoke to the sound of soft footsteps outside her door. She sat up, blinking the sleep from her eyes, and saw the celestial fox sitting by the door, its ears perked up as it listened. The fox's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Zira could have sworn it was trying to communicate something in urgency, a need to move. Leo, she thought, her mind immediately going to her new companion. She dressed quickly, grabbed her gear, and opened the door, the fox slipping out ahead of her, as if leading the way. The facility was quiet, the air still with the early morning calm, but Zira's instincts told her that something was about to happen. She found Leo in the common area, already awake and dressed, his expression alert. He looked up as she approached, and she could see the same sense of anticipation in his eyes. Did you feel it too? Leo asked, his voice low. Zira nodded. Something's coming. I don't know what, but we need to be ready. Leo nodded in agreement, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. What do you think it is? Leo nodded in agreement, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. What do you think it is? Zira considered the question, her mind racing through the possibilities. I don't know. But the fox senses it too. Whatever it is, it's connected to what happened yesterday. We need to be prepared for anything. They both fell silent, their senses on high alert as they waited. The tension in the air was palpable, the stillness of the facility almost oppressive. Outside, the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if the planet itself was waiting for whatever was about to unfold. Then, without warning, the facility's security alarms blared to life, shattering the silence and sending a jolt of adrenaline through Zira's body. The lights flickered, and the ground shook with the force of a distant explosion. Intruders, Zira shouted, grabbing her weapon and sprinting toward the control room. Leo was right behind her, his own weapon drawn and ready. They burst into the control room, where the monitors displayed chaos outside the facility. A group of heavily armed mercenaries different from the ones Zira had seen in the security footage were attacking the facility's perimeter, using advanced weaponry to breach the outer defenses. The forest around them was ablaze with energy blasts, the trees splintering under the onslaught. Kyle's men? Leo asked, his voice tight with urgency. Zira shook her head, her eyes scanning the monitors. No, these are different. More organized, better equipped. They knew exactly where to hit us. Leo cursed under his breath. What's their objective? Zira's eyes flicked to the celestial fox, which had joined them in the control room, its fur bristling with tension. "The fox," she said, her voice grim. "They're here for the fox." Before Leo could respond, the facility's AI chimed in, its calm voice a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding outside. "Perimeter breach detected. Hostile forces are entering the facility. Evacuation protocols initiated." Zira's mind raced. They were outnumbered, and the facility's defenses were failing. They had to get out now. "We need to move," she said, grabbing a small datapad from the console and shoving it into her pack. "There's an emergency exit through the lower levels. It leads to a network of tunnels that run beneath the forest. We can use them to escape." Leo nodded, his expression determined. "Lead the way." Zira didn't hesitate. She grabbed the fox, who seemed to understand the urgency, and they ran, the sound of the alarms and the explosions echoing in their ears. The facility, once a place of safety and research, was now a war zone, its sterile corridors bathed in the red glow of emergency lights. They reached the entrance to the lower levels, a heavy blast door that slid open with a hiss as Zira keyed in the access code. Beyond it, a dark, narrow stairwell descended into the earth, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient soil. "Go," Zira urged, pushing Leo ahead of her as the fox followed closely behind. They raced down the stairs, the sound of gunfire and shouting growing louder above them. The mercenaries were inside the facility now, and it was only a matter of time before they reached the control room and discovered the emergency exit. The stairwell led to a long, narrow tunnel that stretched out into the darkness, its walls lined with the roots of ancient trees. The tunnel was old, part of a network of passages that crisscrossed beneath the forest, remnants of a time when Zexantara's original inhabitants had sought refuge underground. Zira took the lead, her flashlight cutting through the gloom as they moved quickly but carefully through the tunnel. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls, creating an eerie, rhythmic pattern that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the planet itself. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, they emerged into a larger chamber, the ceiling high and arched like the interior of a cathedral. The air here was cooler, fresher, and the walls were covered in ancient carvings, symbols, and patterns that Zira recognized as the language of Xantara's girliest inhabitants. "Where are we?" Leo asked, his voice hushed as he took in the sight. "An ancient sanctuary," Zira replied, her eyes scanning the carvings. "The people who lived here long ago built these tunnels as a place of worship and protection. This chamber, it's a place of power." Leo frowned. "Power." Zira nodded, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "Xantara is more than just a planet. It's a living entity, with its own consciousness, its own will. The people who lived here understood that, and they built this sanctuary to honor and connect with the planet's spirit. The fox, it's connected to this place, to the power that flows through these walls." But the moment was short-lived. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the tunnel behind them, and Zira's heart skipped a beat. The mercenaries had found the stairwell, and they were closing in fast. "We need to move," Leo said urgently, breaking the spell. Zira nodded, her mind snapping back to the present. She approached the fox, who opened its eyes and looked up at her with an expression that seemed almost sad, as if it knew that their moment of peace was over. "Come on," Zira said gently, scooping the fox into her arms. "We have to go." The fox didn't resist, and together they made their way to the far end of the chamber, where another tunnel led deeper into the earth. The light from the carvings dimmed as they moved away, and the chamber returned to its natural darkness, the ancient symbols fading back into the stone. The tunnel they followed was narrower than the previous one, its walls close and oppressive. The air was thick with moisture, and the ground was uneven, forcing them to move slowly and carefully. But Zira knew they couldn't afford to slow down. The mercenaries were right behind them, and if they were caught here, there would be no escape. As they rounded a bend in the tunnel, the sound of the pursuing footsteps grew louder, closer. Zira's heart raced, and she glanced back at Leo, who met her gaze with a look of determination. They were running out of time. Then, up ahead, Zira saw a faint light at the end of the tunnel, a sign that they were nearing the surface. Relief surged through her, but it was quickly tempered by the realization that the mercenaries were still on their heels. "Keep going," Zira urged, pushing herself to move faster. They burst out of the tunnel into the open air, emerging in a dense thicket of trees. The light here was dim, filtered through the thick canopy above, but it was a welcome change from the claustrophobic darkness of the tunnel. Zira looked around, trying to get her bearings. They were deep in the forest, far from the facility, but still within the mercenaries' reach. They needed to find a way to lose their pursuers, to put as much distance between them as possible. "This way," Zira said, leading them through the trees. "There's a river nearby. If we can reach it, we can follow it downstream and lose them in the forest." Leo didn't argue, following her lead as they pushed through the underbrush. The sound of the mercenaries' footsteps had faded, but Zira knew they weren't far behind. The forest was their only ally now, its dense foliage providing cover and concealment as they made their escape. They reached the river within minutes, the water rushing by in a steady current. Zira didn't hesitate, she waded into the water, the cold shock of it jolting her senses. Leo followed, the fox clinging to his shoulder as they moved through the river. The current was strong but manageable, and they followed it downstream, the sound of the water masking their movements. Zira's mind raced as she tried to think of their next move. The mercenaries would eventually reach the river and realize where they had gone. They needed to keep moving to stay one step ahead. As they rounded a bend in the river, Zira spotted a small cave set into the riverbank, partially hidden by a curtain of vines. It wasn't much, but it would provide temporary shelter and a chance to regroup. There, she pointed. We can hide in there. They made their way to the cave, pushing aside the vines to reveal a narrow entrance. Zira slipped inside, the cool darkness of the cave a welcome relief from the tension outside. Leo followed, and they collapsed against the cave wall, the weight of their escape finally catching up to them. For a moment they simply sat there, catching their breath, the sound of the river outside providing a soothing backdrop to the chaos they had just escaped. Zira looked over at Leo, who was cradling the fox in his arms, the creature's eyes half closed with exhaustion. She could see the concern in Leo's eyes, the unspoken question of what they would do next. We're safe for now, Zira said, her voice quiet. But we can't stay here long. They'll keep searching, and it's only a matter of time before they find us. Leo nodded, his expression serious. We need a plan, something that gives us the upper hand. Zira agreed, but the truth was, she was running out of ideas. The mercenaries were relentless, their resources vast. They had the advantage, and it seemed like every move Zira and Leo made only delayed the inevitable. But as she looked down at the fox, who was now nestled in her lap, a new resolve began to take hold. The sanctuary they had found in the tunnels had shown her something she hadn't fully understood until now. The sanctuary, Zira murmured, more to herself than to Leo. Leo looked at her, confusion in his eyes. What about it? Zira met his gaze, her voice steady. The sanctuary was a place of power, a connection to Xantara itself. The fox, it responded to that power. I think there might be more places like that on the planet. Places where we can find refuge, where we can tap into the planet's energy. Leo frowned, trying to follow her line of thought. But how do we find them? We can't just wander the forest hoping to stumble across another one. Zira shook her head. No, we can't. But the fox can. Leo's eyes widened in realization. You think the fox can lead us to these places? Zira nodded, her voice firm. I do. The fox has a connection to this planet that we don't fully understand, but it's there. It knew about the sanctuary, maybe it can sense other places of power, places where we can hide or even fight back. Leo considered this, his expression thoughtful. It's a long shot, but it's the best option we've got. Zira agreed. It's a risk, but we don't have much choice. We can't keep running. We need to find a way to turn the tables on these mercenaries, and the fox might be our only hope. Leo looked down at the fox, who was now watching them with those deep, intelligent eyes. The creature seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, its gaze steady and calm. All right, Leo said, determination in his voice. We follow the fox. Wherever it leads us, we go. Zira nodded, a sense of purpose settling over her. They had a plan, a direction. It was a slim hope, but it was something to hold on to. We should rest for a bit, Zira said, leaning back against the cave wall. We'll need our strength for what's ahead. Leo agreed, and they settled in for a brief rest, the fox curling up between them. The cave was dark and cool, a welcome reprieve from the tension and danger outside. For the first time in what felt like days, Zira allowed herself to relax, if only for a moment. As she drifted off to sleep, her thoughts turned to the sanctuary, to the ancient power that flowed through Xantara's veins. She didn't fully understand it, but she knew that it was real, that it was something worth protecting. And she knew that, whatever happened next, she and Leo would face it together. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. They were no longer just allies, but partners in a struggle that was far from over. And as they ventured deeper into the mysteries of Xantara, Zira couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the planet had in store for them. But one thing was certain, they were no longer just running. They were fighting back. And, with the celestial fox by their side, they might just stand a chance. The dawn of Xantara was unlike any other. Soft hues of violet and indigo painted the sky as the twin moons retreated, making way for the sun's first rays. Yet the serene beauty of the planet's morning was at odds with the tension that clung to the air, an invisible thread that tied Zira and Leo to the imminent danger lurking just beyond their temporary sanctuary. Inside the cave, the atmosphere was still, save for the rhythmic sound of Leo's breathing and the faint stirrings of the celestial fox, which lay nestled between him and Zira. They had slept in shifts, their rest brief and uneasy, haunted by the knowledge that the mercenaries were still out there hunting them. But the night had passed without incident, and as the first light of day crept into the cave, it was time to move again. Zira stirred, her eyes fluttering open to meet the dim glow of the morning light. For a moment she was disoriented, the events of the previous day crashing back into her mind like a tidal wave. The chase, the sanctuary, the realization that they were in more danger than ever, it all hit her at once, and she felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. But then she glanced down at the celestial fox, who had awoken as well, its large, luminous eyes gazing up at her with an almost reassuring calm. The creature seemed to sense her unease, and in response it nuzzled her hand, a soft, comforting gesture that eased her tension. Leo was already awake, sitting near the entrance of the cave, his expression thoughtful as he watched the sun rise over the forest. The light illuminated his face, casting deep shadows under his eyes, a testament to the strain they had both been under. But there was also a steely determination in his gaze, a resolve that mirrored Zira's. "Morning," he said quietly, turning to look at her as she approached. "How are you holding up?" Zira offered a faint smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been better, but I've also been worse." "You?" Leo shrugged, his gaze shifting back to the forest. "Same. We've made it this far, though. That's something." Zira nodded, sitting down beside him, the celestial fox at her feet. "We have. But we're not out of the woods yet, literally or figuratively." Leo chuckled softly, the sound a rare moment of levity in their current predicament. "No, we're not. But I've been thinking we don't have to do this alone." Zira turned to him, curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Leo glanced at her, then back at the forest, his expression contemplative. "You mentioned before that you had friends on this planet. People you could trust. What if we reach out to them? We can't keep running forever, but maybe with some help we can turn the tables on these mercenaries." Zira considered this, her mind racing. It was true, she did have allies on Xantara, people she had worked with over the years, trusted colleagues and friends who would be willing to help. But the thought of involving them in this dangerous situation had initially given her pause. She didn't want to put anyone else in harm's way. Yet Leo's words made sense. They couldn't do this alone, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized that trying to protect the fox on their own was a losing battle. They needed backup, and they needed it now. "You're right," Zira said finally, her voice resolute. "There are people who can help us, people I trust with my life. But reaching out to them won't be easy. The mercenaries have likely intercepted any conventional communication channels." Leo nodded, already thinking ahead. "Then we do it the old-fashioned way. We find them in person. Do you know where they might be?" Zira did. There was a group of researchers and environmentalists she had worked with closely in the past, based in a remote area of Xantara known for its unique and volatile ecosystem. They were resourceful, experienced in dealing with the planet's many dangers, and most importantly, they were loyal to her. "Yes," Zira replied, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "They're not far from here, half a day's journey. If we move quickly, they'll help us. I'm sure of it." "Then, that's our next move," Leo said, his voice firm. "We find your friends, and we stop running. We make a stand." Zira felt a surge of determination, fueled by Leo's resolve. This was no longer just about survival, it was about taking control of their fate, about fighting back against those who would seek to harm them and the celestial fox. With a final, reassuring glance at the fox, Zira rose to her feet, ready to set their plan into motion. "We need to move quickly," she said, gathering her gear. "The mercenaries will be searching the area. We can't afford to waste any time." Leo stood as well, checking his sidearm before holstering it. "Let's do this." The celestial fox seemed to sense their renewed purpose, and it hopped to its feet, its bushy tail swishing behind it as it trotted toward the cave entrance. Zira and Leo followed, stepping out into the crisp morning air, the forest around them alive with the sounds of waking wildlife. They moved swiftly, making their way through the dense underbrush, the celestial fox leading the way with an uncanny sense of direction. The forest was thick with vegetation, the trees towering above them like ancient sentinels, their gnarled roots twisting through the earth in intricate patterns. The air was cool and damp, the scent of moss and earth filling their lungs as they pressed on. Despite the urgency of their mission, Zira found herself taking in the beauty of her surroundings, reminded once again of why she had chosen to make Santara her home. The planet was alive in a way that few other places in the universe were. Every leaf, every stone seemed to pulse with the energy of the world beneath their feet. It was a place of mystery and wonder, and she felt a deep connection to it, a bond that had only grown stronger over the years. As they journeyed, Zira couldn't help but glance at Leo from time to time, noting the way he moved with quiet confidence, his senses attuned to the slightest sounds around them. He was a skilled pilot. That much was clear, but there was something more to him, something that went beyond his training. It was a calmness, a steadiness that had become a source of strength for Zira in these uncertain times. She was beginning to realize just how much she had come to rely on Leo, not just as an ally, but as a companion in this strange and dangerous journey. There was a connection between them, one that had been forged in the crucible of shared danger, and it was growing stronger with each passing moment. But now was not the time for reflection. They had a mission to complete, and the clock was ticking. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky as they made their way through the forest. The terrain grew more rugged as they approached their destination, the ground rising into rocky hills covered in thick vegetation. Zira knew they were getting close, and her heart quickened with anticipation. Then, as they rounded a bend in the path, the dense foliage gave way to a clearing, and Zira spotted the first sign of civilization, a small, well-hidden outpost nestled against the base of a steep cliff. The structure was camouflaged to blend in with its surroundings, its walls covered in living vines that made it nearly invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. "We're here," Zira said, her voice low. "This is the place." Leo nodded, scanning the area with a practiced eye. "Looks quiet. Almost too quiet." Zira understood his concern. The outpost was usually bustling with activity, but today, it seemed eerily still. She approached the entrance cautiously, her hand resting on her weapon, as she keyed in the access code. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit interior. "Stay close," Zira whispered to Leo as they stepped inside. The interior of the outpost was a stark contrast to the lush forest outside. It was a functional, utilitarian space, filled with equipment and supplies for field research. The air was cool and dry, the hum of machinery the only sound as they moved through the corridors. Zira led the way to the central control room, her nerves on edge. She knew the people who ran this outpost. They were friends, allies in her work, but the silence that greeted them was unsettling, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When they reached the control room, Zira's fears were confirmed. The room was empty, the monitors dark, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt electronics. There had been a struggle here, and it was clear that the outpost had been compromised. "Damn it," Zira muttered under her breath, her heart sinking. "We're too late." Leo stepped forward, his expression grim as he surveyed the room. "Looks like they were hit hard. Do you think anyone made it out?" Zira shook her head, her mind racing. "I don't know, but we need to find out. There's a backup generator in the lower levels. If we can get it running, we might be able to access the security logs, see what happened here." Leo nodded, already moving toward the door. "Let's do it." They descended into the lower levels of the outpost, the air growing cooler as they moved deeper underground. The backup generator was located in a secure chamber, its walls lined with reinforced steel to protect it from any potential attack. Zira quickly keyed in the access code, and the door slid open with a heavy thud. The generator room was small and cramped, filled with machinery that hummed softly in the dim light. Zira moved to the control panel, her fingers flying over the keys as she initiated the startup sequence. The generator sputtered to life, the lights flickering on as the system powered up. "Got it," Zira said, a note of relief in her voice. "Now let's see if we can get those logs." They returned to the control room where the monitors had come back to life, displaying a series of data streams and security feeds. Zira quickly accessed the logs, scrolling through the footage until she found what she was looking for. The security footage showed the outpost being attacked in the dead of night, the mercenaries moving with the same precision and efficiency they had seen before. The outpost defenders had put up a fight, but they had been outnumbered and outgunned. The attackers had stormed the facility, taking several people captive and leaving the rest either dead or injured. Zira's heart ached as she recognized some of the faces on the screen: friends, colleagues, people she had trusted. They had been caught off guard, and now they were paying the price. "Damn it," Leo muttered. his eyes fixed on the screen. These guys are relentless. They won't stop until they get what they want. Zira's hands clenched into fists, her anger boiling over. They're after the fox. They think it's the key to something powerful. But they don't understand what they're dealing with. If they keep pushing, they could destroy everything. Leo placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his voice calm but firm. We won't let that happen. We'll find your friends, and we'll stop these mercenaries once and for all. Zira looked at him, her resolve hardening. You're right. We need to find the survivors and we need to hit back. The security logs revealed that some of the outpost's defenders had managed to escape during the attack, retreating into the forest to regroup. They had left behind a series of encrypted messages, indicating their last known location, a remote area deep within the forest, where they hoped to gather reinforcements and launch a counterattack. That's where we're headed, Zira said, memorizing the coordinates. If we can link up with the survivors, we'll have a chance to fight back. Leo nodded, already preparing to move. Let's get going then. The sooner we find them, the better. They left the outpost behind, plunging back into the forest with renewed determination. The celestial fox trotted alongside them, its eyes bright with a sense of purpose, as if it understood the importance of their mission. The forest grew denser as they traveled deeper into Santara's heart, the trees towering overhead like ancient guardians, their branches forming a natural canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft emerald glow. The air was thick with the scent of earth and foliage, the ground beneath their feet covered in a carpet of moss and fallen leaves. After hours of trekking through the wilderness, they finally reached the coordinates indicated in the messages. The area was a natural clearing, surrounded by thick underbrush and towering trees. It was a place of beauty and solitude, but it was also eerily quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Zira scanned the area, her heart pounding with anticipation. They should be here. If they made it. Her words were cut off by the sound of rustling leaves, and before she could react, a group of figures emerged from the trees, their weapons drawn and aimed directly at Zira and Leo. Hold it right there, one of the figures barked. A tall man with a grizzled beard and a scar running down the side of his face. Zira's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the man Jax, one of her oldest friends and a trusted ally. Relief flooded through her, and she quickly raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. Jax, it's me, she called out, her voice steady despite the tension. Zira. The man's eyes widened in recognition, and he lowered his weapon, motioning for the others to do the same. Zira? Thank the stars, you're alive? The tension in the air eased as Jax stepped forward, embracing Zira in a tight hug. We thought we'd lost you. Zira returned the hug, her relief palpable. I thought the same about you. What happened? How did you escape? Jax released her, his expression grim. We were hit hard. Those mercenaries came out of nowhere, and they were after something specific. We managed to slip away in the chaos, but we lost a lot of good people. Zira's heart sank at the news, but she pushed aside her grief, knowing they didn't have time to dwell on it. We need to strike back, Jax. They're after the celestial fox, and if they get their hands on it, Santara could be in serious danger. Jax's gaze shifted to the fox, who was sitting calmly at Zira's feet, its eyes watching him with a calm intelligence. So that's what this is all about, he muttered, his expression darkening. I knew they were after something big, but I didn't realize it was this. Zira nodded. The fox is more important than they realize. It's connected to Santara in ways we're only beginning to understand. If they try to harness its power, they could destroy everything. Jax's expression hardened with resolve. Then we'll stop them. We've regrouped with a few of the others who made it out. We've got weapons, supplies, and a plan. But we need all the help we can get. Zira glanced at Leo, who nodded in agreement. We're with you, she said firmly. Whatever it takes, we'll fight back. Jax clapped a hand on Leo's shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie. Glad to have you with us, friend. We're going to need all the firepower we can get. With their plans set, the group moved quickly to prepare for the coming battle. They knew the mercenaries would be back, and this time they wouldn't be caught off guard. Zira and Leo worked alongside Jax and the others, fortifying their position, setting up traps, and laying out a strategy to defend the fox and repel the attackers. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest, the air grew heavy with anticipation. The forest was alive with the sounds of wildlife, but beneath that there was an unmistakable tension, a sense that something big was about to happen. Zira stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The celestial fox was by her side, its ears twitching as it listened to the sounds of the forest. Leo was nearby, checking his weapon and going over the plan with Jax one last time. "You ready for this?" Leo asked as he approached her, his voice low but steady. Zira nodded, her expression resolute. "As ready as I'll ever be. We've got the element of surprise on our side. We just have to make it count." Leo smiled, a small but reassuring gesture. "We will. We've got each other, and we've got the fox. We'll make it through this." Zira appreciated his confidence, but she couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that hung over her. She knew what was at stake, and she knew how dangerous their enemies were, but she also knew that she couldn't afford to let fear hold her back. Not now. "Let's do this," she said, her voice firm. They didn't have to wait long. As night fell and the stars began to appear in the sky, the mercenaries made their move. The first sign of their approach was the sound of rustling leaves, followed by the faint glow of lights moving through the trees. Zira and the others took up their positions, lying in wait as the mercenaries entered the clearing. The attackers were confident, moving with the same precision and efficiency that had served them well in the past. But this time, they had underestimated their opponents. The ambush was swift and brutal. As the mercenaries stepped into the clearing, Zira and her allies opened fire, catching them off guard. The initial volley of shots sent the attackers scrambling for cover, but they quickly regrouped, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Zira's heart pounded in her chest as she fired her weapon, the air around her crackling with the sound of energy blasts. The battle was chaotic, the darkness of the night making it difficult to see who was friend and who was foe. But she fought with everything she had, driven by a fierce determination to protect the fox and her friends. The celestial fox, sensing the danger, moved with surprising agility, darting between the trees and staying out of the line of fire. Its presence was a calming influence on Zira, a reminder of what they were fighting for. Leo was in the thick of the battle, his movements quick and precise as he took down mercenary after mercenary. His training as a pilot had given him an edge, and he fought with a quiet intensity that was both impressive and terrifying. Jax and the others were equally formidable, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. The mercenaries, for all their training and firepower, were at a disadvantage in the dense forest, and it wasn't long before their numbers began to dwindle. But the fight was far from over. The mercenaries were relentless, refusing to back down even as their forces were decimated. They were after the fox, and they would stop at nothing to get it. As the battle raged on, Zira spotted the mercenary leader Kale, the grizzled veteran she had contacted earlier. He was directing his men with ruthless efficiency, his eyes fixed on the celestial fox, who had taken refuge behind a fallen log. Zira's blood ran cold as she realized Kale's intent. He wasn't going to stop until he had the fox, no matter the cost. And if he succeeded, the consequences would be catastrophic. Zira shouted over the noise of the battle, her voice filled with urgency. "We have to stop Kale." Leo followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing as he saw the mercenary leader closing in on the fox. "I'm on it." They moved together, cutting through the chaos of the battlefield with single-minded determination. Kale was close now, his weapon trained on the fox as he approached, a cruel smile playing on his lips. But before he could fire, Zira and Leo opened fire, their shots forcing him to dive for cover. Kale cursed under his breath, his eyes blazing with anger as he turned his attention to them. "You're too late," Zira Kale shouted, his voice filled with venom. "That fox is mine." "Over my dead body," Zira shot back, her voice filled with defiance. Kale laughed, the sound cold and devoid of humor. "If that's what it takes." The final showdown was intense, the air crackling with energy as Zira and Leo engaged Kale in a fierce firefight. The mercenary leader was a skilled combatant, his movements quick and calculated as he dodged their shots and returned fire with deadly precision. But Zira and Leo fought with a determination born of desperation, their every move driven by the need to protect the fox and stop Kale's plans. They moved as one, their coordination flawless as they pressed the attack. The battle reached its climax as Kale made a desperate bid to reach the fox, charging forward with a roar of defiance. But Zira and Leo were ready. In a coordinated strike, they fired simultaneously, their shots hitting Kale square in the chest. The mercenary leader staggered, his eyes wide with shock as he crumpled to the ground, his weapon slipping from his grasp. For a moment he lay still, his breathing ragged, before finally going silent. The battlefield fell quiet. The only sounds the crackling of burning foliage and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. The mercenaries, seeing their leader fall, began to retreat, their morale shattered. Zira and Leo stood over Kale's body, their breaths coming in heavy gasps as the reality of what they had just accomplished sank in. The battle was over. They had won. But the victory was bittersweet. The cost had been high, and Zira knew that the fight was far from over. There were still questions to be answered, and the threat to Centaura was not yet fully extinguished. But for now, they had bought themselves some time, and that was enough. Zira turned to Leo, her expression softening. "Thank you, Leo. I couldn't have done this without you." Leo smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "We did it together, and I wouldn't have had it any other way." The celestial fox emerged from its hiding place, its eyes shining with an ethereal light as it approached them. Zira knelt down, reaching out to stroke the fox's fur, a sense of peace settling over her as she did. "We're safe for now," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet reverence. "But we need to get back to the facility, regroup, and figure out our next move." Leo nodded, his expression serious. "Agreed. We've won this battle, but the war isn't over." Jax approached, his face grim but relieved. "We took heavy losses, but we held our ground. The mercenaries are retreating. For now." Zira stood, her resolve hardening. "We'll need to be ready for whatever comes next. But first we need to get back to the facility and take care of our wounded. We can't let everyone to damn." With that, the group began to gather their supplies and prepare to head back to the facility. The journey was somber, the weight of their losses heavy on their shoulders. But there was also a sense of accomplishment, a feeling that, despite the odds, they had survived and protected what mattered most. As they walked, Zira couldn't help but glance at Leo, a question forming in her mind. He had been her rock throughout this ordeal, his presence a source of strength and comfort. But now that the immediate danger had passed, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. When they finally reached the facility, the survivors were already beginning to regroup, tending to the wounded and fortifying their defenses. The celestial fox, sensing the relative safety of the place, relaxed, its eyes half-closing as it settled down to rest. Zira stood by the entrance, watching as the others worked. The facility felt different now, no longer just a place of research, but a fortress, a last bastion of hope against the dangers that threatened Centaura. Leo approached, his expression thoughtful. "So, what now?" Zira turned to him, her gaze softening. "We regroup, plan our next move. But there's something else." Leo raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Zira hesitated, then took a deep breath. "You said before that you had nowhere to stay. Your ship is still damaged, and it might take some time to repair. I was thinking if you'd like you could stay here, at least until your ship is ready." Leo blinked, surprised by the offer. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to impose." Zira smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "You wouldn't be imposing. You've done more than enough to earn a place here. And besides, I'd like you to stay." Leo met her gaze, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I'd like that too." "Thank you, Zira." For a moment, they simply stood there, the bond between them stronger than ever. The danger had not passed, but they had faced it together, and that had made all the difference. As the night fell once more over Centaura, Zira and Leo walked back inside the facility, the celestial fox following close behind. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Zira felt a sense of hope, a feeling that, no matter what came next, they would face it together. And as they stepped into the warmth and safety of the facility, Zira knew that she had made the right choice. Leo wasn't just a temporary ally, he was someone she could trust, someone she could count on. And as they prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, she found comfort in the knowledge that, in this vast and dangerous universe, she was no longer alone. Chapter 5. Love Among the Stars. The days turned into weeks at Zira's home, a sanctuary nestled deep within Centaura's most ancient forest. The danger had passed, and with it, the frantic pace of survival gave way to a new rhythm, one of quiet moments and growing affection. The sun rose and set over the vast expanse of green, the light filtering through the dense canopy to cast dappled patterns on the forest floor. It was a world filled with the subtle hum of life, where every breath seemed to carry with it the promise of renewal and discovery. Zira's home was a reflection of her mind, both a fortress of solitude and a place of boundless curiosity. The walls were lined with shelves overflowing with artifacts, samples, and notes meticulously gathered over years of exploration and research. Each object told a story, a piece of the puzzle that was Centaura. And now, for the first time, someone was there to share in the wonder of it all. Leo, too, found himself captivated by this world. The pilot who had once been content to drift through the stars, exploring distant planets and galaxies, now found that his journey had led him to something far more profound. Centaura was not just another planet on a star map, it was a living, breathing entity, filled with secrets that called out to be uncovered. And at the heart of it all was Zero, a woman whose passion for science and nature matched his own, and whose spirit had drawn him in like a beacon in the dark. They spent their days side by side, immersed in their work. Leo's mechanical skills proved invaluable as they set about repairing the damaged parts of Zero's facility. The ship that had brought him to this strange world now served as a source of parts and technology, which they integrated into Zero's systems to enhance her research capabilities. Together, they explored the depths of Xantara's mysteries, delving into the planet's unique flora and fauna, and seeking to understand the forces that had shaped it. In the evenings, when the light faded and the forest settled into a peaceful quiet, they would sit together on the wide veranda that overlooked a shimmering lake. The stars above seemed brighter here, closer, as if they were reaching out to the world below. It was during these moments, when the night wrapped around them like a soft blanket, that they talked about everything about their past, their dreams, their hopes for the future. Zero found herself opening up to Leo in ways she hadn't with anyone else. She told him about her childhood growing up in a small colony on the outskirts of the galaxy, where her love for science had first taken root. She spoke of the mentors who had guided her, the challenges she had faced as a woman in a field dominated by men, and the loneliness that had driven her to seek out the farthest corners of the universe, always searching for something more. Leo listened with rapt attention, sharing his own stories in return. He told her about his life as a pilot, the thrill of navigating through uncharted space, and the quiet moments of awe that had kept him going when the vastness of the universe felt overwhelming. He spoke of the connections he had made and lost, the fleeting nature of his relationships, and how he had always felt like he was searching for a place to belong. As the nights passed, those conversations began to shift. The words became more personal, more intimate, as they both realized that they had found in each other what they had been searching for all along. The connection between them was undeniable, a bond that had grown out of shared experience, mutual respect, and a deep, abiding affection. Zero found herself drawn to Leo's kindness, his unwavering support, and the way he seemed to understand her in ways no one else ever had. He made her feel seen, valued, and cherished. And Leo, in turn, was captivated by Zero's intelligence, her fierce independence, and the vulnerability she allowed him to see. She had let him into her world, and in doing so, had given him a sense of purpose, a reason to stay. One evening, as they sat together on the veranda, watching the stars reflect off the still waters of the lake, Zero felt a shift within herself, a realization that had been building for some time, now crystallizing into something undeniable. She turned to Leo, her heart pounding in her chest, and took his hand in hers. "Leo," she began, her voice soft but steady, "there's something I need to tell you." Leo looked at her, sensing the seriousness of her tone. "What is it, Zero?" Zero hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She had always been so focused on her work, on her mission to protect Xantara and the Celestial Fox. But now, for the first time, she realized that her feelings for Leo had become just as important, just as central to her life. "I've spent so much of my life alone," she said, her gaze holding his. "I've always thought that my work was enough, that it was all I needed. But then you came into my life, and everything changed. You've shown me that there's more to life than just research and discovery. You've shown me what it means to love and to be loved." Leo's eyes softened, his hand tightening around hers. "Zero." She smiled, a warmth spreading through her as she spoke the words she had been holding back. "I love you, Leo. I've tried to ignore it, to focus on my work, but I can't deny it any longer. You've become a part of my life, a part of me, and I can't imagine a future without you." Leo's heart swelled with emotion, his eyes shining as he looked at her. "I love you too, Zero. More than I ever thought possible." Zero took a deep breath, her voice trembling with emotion as she continued. "I know that I haven't properly repaid you for everything you've done for saving the fox, for staying with me, for helping me protect this planet. But there's one thing I can offer you, one way I can show you how much you mean to me." Leo frowned slightly, curiosity and concern flickering in his eyes. "Zero, you don't owe me anything. You've given me so much already, your trust, your love. That's more than enough." Zero shook her head, her gaze never leaving his. "It's not about owing you, Leo. It's about wanting to share my life with you. All of it. And I realized that the best way to do that, the best way to express my gratitude and my love, is to ask you something." Leo's breath caught in his throat as he began to understand what she was leading to. His heart raced, his emotions a whirlwind of hope and anticipation. Zero smiled, her eyes shimmering with tears as she spoke the words that had been on her heart for days. "Leo, will you marry me?" For a moment there was only silence, the world around them holding its breath as the weight of her question hung in the air. Leo stared at her, his heart pounding, his mind reeling with the enormity of what she had just asked. And then, Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms, his voice choked with emotion as he whispered, "Yes, yes, Zira, I will marry you." Zira laughed, a sound filled with pure joy as she wrapped her arms around him, holding him close. They sat there together, their foreheads touching, both of them overwhelmed by the depth of their feelings for each other. The celestial fox, who had been lying quietly beside them, looked up at the couple with its deep, knowing eyes. It seemed to understand the significance of the moment, its presence a silent witness to the love that had blossomed between Zira and Leo. As they sat there in each other's arms, the stars above shining like 1,000 tiny blessings, Zira felt a sense of peace, unlike anything she had ever known. She had spent so much of her life searching for answers, for understanding, but now she realized that the greatest discovery of all was the love she had found with Leo. The days that followed were filled with quiet joy and anticipation as they began to plan their future together. They worked side by side as they always had, but now there was a new sense of purpose, a shared dream that bound them even closer. The forest around them seemed to come alive with the energy of their love, the trees whispering secrets to the wind, the lake shimmering with a deeper, more vibrant light. Santara itself seemed to celebrate their union, its beauty a reflection of the bond they had forged. On the day of their wedding, the forest was in full bloom, the air filled with the scent of wildflowers and the sweet song of birds. Zira and Leo stood together in a clearing by the lake, the celestial fox at their side, and exchanged vows that were as much a promise to each other as they were to the planet they had come to love. Zira wore a simple dress made of flowing, silken fabric that shimmered in the sunlight, its color matching the vibrant green of the forest. Her hair was adorned with delicate flowers that Leo had picked for her that morning, each one a symbol of the life they were about to embark on together. Leo, dressed in a tunic that Zira had fashioned from the softest fabric she could find, looked every bit the explorer she had fallen in love with, his eyes bright with happiness as he took her hands in his. They spoke their vows softly, their voices filled with emotion as they pledged their lives to each other. There were no grand speeches, no elaborate ceremonies, just the two of them, standing together in the place that had brought them together, surrounded by the beauty of Xantara. As they exchanged rings, simple bands they had crafted together from the metals found in the planet's rich soil, Zira felt a tear slip a tear soul. It was a tear of joy, of gratitude for the love she had found and the future that lay ahead. "You are my home," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion as she looked into Leo's eyes. "And I will love you for as long as we both shall live." Leo smiled, his own eyes filled with tears as he replied, "And you are my heart, Zira. I will love you until the stars no longer shine." They sealed their vows with a kiss that was both tender and filled with passion, a kiss that spoke of all the promises they had made to each other. The celestial fox let out a soft, joyful cry, its presence a blessing on their union. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the forest around them seemed to come alive with light and color, the planet itself celebrating the love that had taken root in its soil. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered happiness, a moment that would live on in their hearts forever. In the weeks that followed, Zira and Leo settled into their new life together, their days filled with work and discovery, their nights filled with love and quiet contentment. They continued their research, uncovering new secrets about Xantara and its unique ecosystem, but now they did so as partners in every sense of the word. They built a life together, a life filled with laughter and joy, with shared dreams and the quiet comfort of knowing that they had found and that they explored the farthest reaches of Xantara, hand in hand, always together, always in love. And through it all, the celestial fox remained by their side, its presence a reminder of the journey they had taken together, of the challenges they had overcome, and of the love that had blossomed in the heart of the wild, untamed planet. Zira and Leo had found something precious, something rare, a love that was as deep and enduring as the planet itself. And as they looked out over the forest, the sun setting in a blaze of color on the horizon, they knew that they had found not just a home, but a future filled with endless possibilities. For in the heart of Xantara, surrounded by the beauty of the natural world and the love they shared, Zira and Leo had found their true purpose, their true happiness. And it was a happiness that would last for a lifetime. As they pulled away, their eyes locked, Zira felt a surge of affection so strong it took her breath away. She had never imagined she could feel this way about anyone, had never thought she would find someone who understood her so completely. But Leo had changed everything. He had shown her a love that was deep and true, and now, as they sat together under the stars, she knew she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. Leo's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear that had slipped down her face. "You've made me the happiest man in the universe," Zira, he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. And you've made me the happiest woman, Zira replied, her heart full. I never knew it was possible to feel this way, but now that I do, I never want it to end. They spent the rest of the evening wrapped in each other's arms, the connection between them deepening with every word, every touch. It was a night of quiet intimacy, of shared dreams and whispered promises, a night that would live on in their memories for years to come. And when the night finally gave way to dawn, when the first light of the new day began to filter through the trees, they knew that their love had been sealed not just with words, but with the bond they had forged in their hearts. The days that followed were filled with quiet joy and anticipation as they began to plan their future together. They worked side by side as they always had, but now there was a new sense of purpose, a shared dream that bound them even closer. The forest around them seemed to come alive with the energy of their love, the trees whispering secrets to the wind, the lake shimmering with a deeper, more vibrant light. Centera itself seemed to celebrate their union, its beauty a reflection of the bond they had forged. And as they continued their journey together, they knew that their love, like the planet they had come to cherish, would endure for a lifetime.